Howdly doodly do. Today we're going to tell you how to improve your Darth Vader starter deck.
Howdy doodly do.
Yes, howdly doodly do. Talking's the name.
Doodly do. How are you?
How are you?
What is this nonsense?
So what we've done is we've made on PowerPoint. I'm here with Tony and Mark. We're going to talk about how you improve your Darth Vader starter deck.
We're here with Ned Flanders from The Simpsons.
With Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, yeah.
I asked you guys if you could give me an improved Darth Vader starter deck. So let's get into my slides. And I am sure if you're here, I'm going to assume that you've played the Darth Vader starter deck a little bit and you know how Darth Vader works. If you haven't, then that's your mission, is to go figure out Darth Vader. And we did do a video a few weeks ago on that. Lots more videos on the channel, so consider subscribing. But we know Vader is a very powerful leader. His ability to bully opponents with his relentless chip damage and his damage to the base is very powerful. He can also come into the game very early and start swinging for 10 damage if you're lucky enough to draw his lightsaber. So he is a good leader. How does this starter deck play? So please correct me if you guys think I'm missing anything, but he clears small units quickly. Obviously, he can remove shields with his chip damage as well, and he deals damage to the base. He has multiple ways to get to the 7 resources earlier than normal. That would be with the super laser destroyers, super laser technicians, which he can kill himself. And there's some resupplies, I believe. There is one in the starter deck. He has lots of synergy because there's lots of Imperial cards in that starter deck, and that is what he needs to be playing to use his ability. He potentially draws cards even quicker with the card I Am Your Father, because basically no one's going to let you do all that damage to their unit. They'll always say no most of the time, and you'll get 3 extra cards. And yes, like I said, if you didn't see my tips video on this, then there is a starter decks tip video. We'll link that up above. So here is the Darth Vader starter deck. Is there anything obvious, guys, that I missed that you wanted to highlight from the starter deck that's worth talking about, or did I catch most of it?
I think maybe the thing with the I Am Your Father. Now, I love playing Vader. Vader's my favourite leader to play. And I also really like I Am Your Father, just because it's fun to make people go, no! But when you're playing it, you just have to assume that whatever you want your opponent to do is not what they're going to do. If you want to kill a unit, they're going to get you drawing cards. If you want to draw cards, they're going to make you kill off some trash unit.
Which can be good. You can occasionally set up a win-win situation for yourself. But
you absolutely can, especially if you do things like clear off all the units and then play it. But it's a really awkward card. For me, it's much more of this is a really fun card than this is I want to win card. And certainly if I'm trying with this very starter deck itself, I do find myself resourcing it more and more.
Okay.
Than some other stuff.
No, that's all fair. You've played this a bunch, John. We played Luke versus Vader for the starter decks a few times, you and I. So you're pretty clued in on this.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I maybe didn't mention is Vader kills opponents very, very quickly. Like, just that 1 damage coming in every single turn when you've got spare mana on the base. With any incidental damage from your units as well, you can just end up killing your opponents quite fast.
Yeah, it certainly helps. Obviously, you've got to make sure you are playing is it an Imperial card or a villain card?
A villain card,
each turn in order to be able to do so. But that's not really a problem with the deck.
Yeah, I think there was only 1 unit in this whole deck that isn't a villain.
Well, looking at the card list there's only 2 cards that aren't villain, and they're both events, and there's only 1 of each of them. So yeah.
Okay, maybe cool. All right, so that is the Vader deck. That is how it plays. Here's option 1. So this was an option to improve the Vader deck done by Mark, and I started by looking at some of the new cards you want to add to the Vader deck. Do you want to tell us why? And then
sure. So Seasoned Shore Trooper is a great card to synergize in a Darth Vader deck, because you want to be ramping to the 7 resources to play Darth Vader as soon as you can. Therefore, Shore Trooper gains value the later you play it in the game. When it gets to 6 resources, having a 4/3 for 2 resources later in the game is really, really powerful. Strike True is a great event that you can use to deal direct damage to something to kill it. Kind of a no-brainer there, fairly cheap at 3 damage. It'll also shoot across arena boundaries, so something on the ground could shoot something in space and vice versa with it. So that
Ooh,
is.
I didn't even twig with me that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. It's like I'll throw my lightsaber, woo, in space. Yeah, and back down again. Ruthless Raider is a wonderful 6-drop. It's so good. When played, deals 2 damage to enemy base and 2 damage to enemy unit. Does 4 damage itself. When killed, it does it again. 6 hit points is a bit of a bugger to deal with. It could be a wonderful late game damage dealing powerhouse, really, because you're going to play it, so you're going to do the 2 damage to the base and an enemy unit, and then your enemy can't really let it live because 4 damage will just stack up and do stuff to base. So it's very useful.
I think that was one thing that I maybe didn't mention earlier is that because of all these incidental damage that Vader will be putting out, you will keep the arenas fairly clear, as well as being able to do the chip damage to the base. And then the final card that we haven't seen in the Vader deck that you mentioned, this is a quite interesting card.
So the improvements that I thought about making to the Vader Starter Deck, I mean, the elephant in the room is Darth Vader the unit is a legendary card. He's one of the most powerful cards in the game. He's one of the most expensive cards in the game to buy in a monetary value terms. So I didn't want to choose any legendary rated cards to put in the deck to improve it. So at 7-drop, this is basically your only real option to stick in the deck to fill in the 7-drop slot to go in there. But also, if you're ramping to get to Vader, you're going to have a lot of resources fairly quickly. So this will gain power as resources go on after you've deployed Vader, and it will just increase in power as turns go on. So it's not a bad unit by any stretch.
It's an interesting card, and it's one that I've been trying to make work a few times, because if you do ramp and you get a good hard ramp, then it's not very expensive for some really silly numbers.
Yeah.
It's not unreasonable to get sort of like this a 7-drop that's got stats of 10-10 and things like that.
The main issue with it is that late in the game, you tend to want something to be able to do something straight away the moment it's played. Dooku kills something when you play him. Darth Vader ambushes and brings another unit out the moment you play him. 97th Legion, you play him, doesn't do anything that turn.
Yeah. So unless you've got something to play alongside it, like to give it the ambush, it makes it quite a tricky play, because at the very least you've got a turn before it's going to do anything, which I do think is quite awkward. The other downside to this is it's a 7-drop. If this was a 6-drop, it'd be broken.
Yeah, because it could then be used alongside Energy Conversion Lab, but it's not.
But it's not.
Cool. So,
however, just going back very briefly to that last card, the day before we filming this, some spoilers happened for set 2, and one of those cards was a green card, which for 1 cost says play another unit. You have to pay the cost to do so. That unit gets ambush.
Oh, okay, that's going to be coming out then.
Oh, yeah, I can see 3 of those in a huge amount of decks. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine bringing that when you've got 12 resources.
Absolutely. It's going to be insane.
Okay, so I put down a list for anyone that's interested of the cards that you added here, and I put down the counts as well, just so that people could see if they were wanting to replicate your deck, what they would actually need to look to.
Yeah. We've got up to 3 super laser techs and 3 resupplies because ramp is critical. You want as many ramp cards as you can to play Vader as soon as you can. Overwhelming Barrage is one of the best events in the game. It's really good. Permanent +2/+2 for the phase, and doing damage to potentially clear the board is just amazing. Get some more Palps in there for an 8-drop because he's really, really good. If you're ramping resources, then have a couple of 9-drops in there with the Relentless to just like wrap up the end game is always useful. The Cell Block Guards in there as a Sentinel. They generally very useful to play, of course. Cool. Essentially, I'm like removing some of the things I don't see massively reliable and replace them with more copies of things to get a more consistent draw.
Yeah. So I think I also noted down for anyone that's interested what you would need to remove. The one thing I was sad you removed was Vader's lightsaber, because I do think, I guess, when you attach it to Vader, it is very, very strong.
So there's a reason for that
as well, isn't it?
It is really powerful. It's really good. You're almost guaranteed to play your Darth Vader because as a leader, he's going to come out one way or the other. But having 3 copies of a card in there to buff your 1 leader unit, because we're not playing the Vader legendary unit in here alongside it as well, feels too much of a... I could be putting more things in the deck instead rather than having 3 copies of something to just buff my leader.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I think end up putting that as a resource.
I'm glad that you said that because I had no idea why you dropped the Vader. So hey, every day is a school day. You learn something.
Maybe put a couple of them in the deck if you like it, but I'd rather have a unit in there doing extra damage than upgrading a single unit to do a little bit more damage, I think.
Okay. So these are the bullet points that I made up about your deck.
Okay.
So I will read them. You tell me if they're baloney. I guess. So you will get to 7 resources quicker because you've got the additional resupplies in the deck. I also picked up that the Shore Trooper becomes very strong for 2 resources when you're above 6, and you're going to be above 6 much quicker, hopefully. You potential to take over the space lane, right? Because the Ruthless Raider and the Interceptor are both going to do damage whenever they come into play, meaning that the opponent is unlikely to have spaceships there, and even if they are, you're going to be able to...
card for that. Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to be killing them. You have even more direct damage in the starter deck as well, with, like you said, Overwhelming Barrage, Palpatine, Strike True. Good point that Strike True can hit from ground to space. So you're hitting hard constantly, you're clearing the board. Every unit except the 97th Legion has a villain aspect, so that was the one unit that doesn't have the villainy aspect. So in terms of using Vader's special ability after you play a villainy, you can do that 99% of the time. And also, like you said, you don't have any legendary decks. Legendary cards.
So given you only need like commons, uncommons, and rares to increase it to that, it's going to be relatively trivial to do.
Cool. So I think that is a good improvement. It's worth trying.
Tony, what do you think?
It's solid. There's a couple of cards in it. Can we flip back to the previous?
Of course
spot?
We can. Yeah.
This is the one. There's a couple of cards in there that I just actually wanted to ask you about. Why you've left them in there. Not that I'm saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just it's a kind of a why question. So, ATST is one of them.
Yep.
Because he's quite expensive. I can sort of see why you'd put him in there if you're running ECL. Because he's a horrible thing to come out of ECL with Overwhelm. But he's a 6-drop. He's quite expensive, and he doesn't really do anything when he first comes into the board.
I couldn't see anything major to replace him with, to be honest. You'll notice that there's no 5-drop units in this because I figure we can skip that one way or the other, or play whatever we need to with the ramp that we're doing in this deck. But as a 6-cost ground unit within the restrictions of not playing legendaries, he doesn't suck.
Fair enough. It's just a good solid 6-1 to go fits in that hole.
Yeah, basically.
And the other one's the Moff.
Moff Tarkin.
Yeah. What are you still doing there, Moffy?
He's again. What else are you going to play in the 4-drop slot in ground? Really?
But do you need anything in the 4-drop slot in ground if you're ramping?
You're going to need something on some turns.
Hopefully, and you probably, if you're anything like me, you're going to mulligan if you didn't get one of your ramp cards in your starting hand. So you're going to go 3 into. So you're going to be on 5. You're never actually going to be at that 4 card.
On turn 2, you got 3 resources. Ideally, you'll be playing the Super Laser Technician or Resupply, which will take you straight to 4 and then go up to 5. Maybe I didn't think about it as much in that regard. Maybe I should have skipped the 4s and gone straight into 5s. Who knows?
We off camera we had a bit of a discussion about this because in my deck I've still kept the Imperial Interceptor, who is a 4, but the reason I've kept it is because I really think that he punches above its weight, not in its stats, which are fine, but it's an ability to do the 3 damage when you deploy it. Means it's very useful because you plonk it down at 4 whenever you've got 4, and it just is just enough damage to clear off some of the lighter space units.
I remember looking at Tarkin and thinking, do I really want him in here? Not really. Can I think of anything better to put in instead of him? Not really. Let's just leave it and move on.
Okay. Why don't we look at? Well, I was going to say, why don't we look at Tony's deck, and maybe in Tony's deck there will be a 4 that we could replace.
No, there isn't. That's the point.
Okay. Well, let's look at what you came up with. This is option 2. Here are some of the cards that you picked out to improve the Vader deck.
So it's 3 cards that I quite like here. A real weakness of the Vader deck, because your leader comes out so late, is you're reliant on ramping up to him as quick as you can, which puts you very, very vulnerable to aggro. So what I've been trying to do is bring as many answers to aggro as I can. And I've sort of, because it's so weak against it, I've been trying to skew, because this is my general deck. This is what I normally play with. So I didn't make this as a starter deck or anything else. This is just what I play with. And for that, I've got a few anti-aggro cards. And coincidentally, you've picked out 2 of them on this page. Bombing Run. Against some aggro decks, they're playing a lot of quite lightweight, cheap cards, lots of Greedos, things like that. And I find that Bombing Run, when is quite a useful card if you just need to clear an arena.
Yep.
You not find that Overwhelming Barrage fills that role, maybe?
It does, and you'll know Overwhelming Barrage is in there as well.
Okay.
And Overwhelming Barrage is a better card, but I can only have 3 of them.
Yep.
And this is where this one comes in. Along the same lines, I've got the Consortium Star Viper. Now, green, red, black villainy isn't the easiest for healing.
That's the truth. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're against an aggro deck, one potential tactic is to take the initiative, and I've got these Consortium Star Vipers in here, which gives me a little bit of restore. And it's going to start bringing back just a little bit of health to try and keep me alive long enough that I can start bringing out some big hitters.
And 3/3 also clears out small units as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still a 3-drop for 3/3 in space. We know that space units are not quite as efficient as ground units, but 3/3 is not bad.
Yeah, 3/3 with Story 2 is good.
Yeah. And the last card in here is Traitorous. I'm going to say Traitorous because it annoys Mark.
I love you, Tony.
Yeah. It's this. I really like this card. It's very limited in its use. It'll only work on a 3-drop or lower. But if you've got someone that's relying very heavily on upgrades and upgrading things like R2-D2s with lightsabers and things like that, it's very funny to nick it.
You got to look at it from the point of view of when you play Traitorous for 5 resources, you're gaining a unit, and at the same time the opponent's losing a unit. Yeah. So from that regard, and a border control stance, it's really good.
I do find myself resourcing it a lot because it depends on what you're playing against. And a lot of the time, if your opponent is playing a lot of mid-range cards, then it becomes useless. But in those, there's 2 scenarios I found this very, very helpful. One, where they've got a quite low-cost thing, especially if they've upgraded it and you want to steal it. The second one is if you're playing another kind of more control deck and they're ramping. And stealing someone's Super Laser Technician with this can absolutely swing the game.
Yeah,
because they're reliant on that ramp, and you've just nicked it.
Yeah,
and then you've got that instead, which means you're ramping to your Vader even faster.
The worst thing you could do is steal a Consortium Star Viper as well. It's still an absolutely worthwhile thing to do. Yeah.
So sorry, can you explain the Super Laser Technician steal to me? Because I thought I didn't. When this upgrade becomes unattached, the unit's owner takes control of it.
Yes.
Yes. So what you do is they put their Super Laser Technician down.
Yep. The Super Laser Technician goes into the resource row of the player who's controlling it when it dies.
So I see. They play it, you steal it, you then kill something with it, or kill it yourself with your Vader, and it's now yours, and you've gained that.
Okay. So it doesn't matter that it says it goes back. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
this was
really
clarified in a number of FAQs.
Very nice.
That can be really, really powerful if you're trying to ramp. And that's what this deck is trying to do. It wants to get up to the big cards as quick as it can. And then it's just going to play heavy hitter after heavy hitter. So all of these other ones are just to get you there.
Yep. Perfect. Okay.
Colonel Yularen is on the same line. Now, I'm not 100% sold on this guy, but I haven't found a really viable alternative. We do suffer against aggro. We need that healing. And again, this is just another source of healing to try and keep you alive for as long as you can. It's not bad for a 2-drop anyway. 2/3 means it's a little bit more annoying to try and get rid of. and it can, even if you're just playing it down as a 2-drop, it still gets you a point of health. And if you're a little bit later on in the game playing it, and you know you've got a couple of cards that you want to play it, probably going to get left alone, because at that point in the game, it's not really that much of a threat. Yep. And then you can play a couple more green units, and that can give you just that little bit more healing. I'm not totally sold on this. It has helped me out in a couple of games. It has won a couple of games, but it's also been effectively useless in a couple of games as well. So I'm not 100% sold on it. So John's just flipped over to what my deck currently looks at. Now, this is, like I said, this is what I'm playing with. This isn't something I've designed for somebody else. It is absolutely not flawless by any stretch of the imagination. And I'll try and highlight a couple of the problems as I get to them. Okay. A lot of this is the same as what Mark just showed us a minute ago. For the similar reasons. I've got Cell Block Guard in there because it's the best cheap Sentinel unit that we can get for ground. Red will get a better one, but we haven't got that, so we'll have to ignore it. The Viper Probe Droid is just to look at your opponent's hand. That can be quite powerful, and it's a decent turn 1 play as well. Shore Troopers in there for the same reason. Admiral Piet. Now, this is a funny card, and it can be quite powerful in the right situation, and in the wrong situation, it's still a fairly defensive sort of unit you can plonk down there, or something you can resource. Now, Admiral Piet's got an ability that if he's on the table, you can play a card that is, I want to say off the top of my head, 6 or higher.
Yep.
It automatically gets ambush.
Which is good. So you want to play it the turn before you play something like your Reinforcement Walker or Palps or Star Destroyer or whatever. Yeah.
So that's quite powerful for a 2-drop. On the occasions when it actually comes out. And even when it doesn't, you're still putting a 4 defense card on the table for a 2-drop.
So I've seen that used in sideboards a lot to be played when you're playing a more end game heavy game against a control deck rather than other ones.
Swapped out a few times.
Yeah.
And I've swapped out often for Force Choke if I'm playing to aggro. Which is a card that I particularly like for those matchups.
You're also very heavy on the turn 1 plays there, but that presupposes that Piet is a turn 1 play, which, as you've described, he's not really.
He's not really. He's there for later on.
Yeah.
Now, other things that you'll note in there, I've got the open fires in there still. This is all about the aggro matchup. The aggro matchup is where this is weak. So I've tried to put as many answers to that as I can. I've got as much healing as I can find in there. I've got a few little lightweight units that trade quite well. I've got as much board clearance as I can get. I've got the overwhelming barrage. I've got the bombing runs, and I've got the open fires. But I've also got the Ruthless Raider, which is great for killing off a little lightweight unit. Palps, his ability to do up to 6 damage and spread it how you like is brilliant, because if you plonk him out, you can clear a lot of chaff.
If you're not familiar with the term aggro, then it basically refers to a deck designed to do as much damage as possible as quickly as possible, which is the natural enemy of this kind of deck, because this deck is more going into the late game, whereas an aggro deck, in theory, kills you before this deck hits its stride. So that's why it's as much of a threat as it is to what Tony's describing.
And then I've got the big hitters. Now, I did say I'd mention some of the flaws in this. One of the major flaws in this is you're going to notice that I've got a lot of 8-drops. I've got 5 8-drops in the main deck, and I've got a spare Reinforcement Walker in the sideboard. And I've also got 2 Devastators in the sideboard. Now, the Devastators are there for when I'm playing a control, basically. If I'm playing someone that's going to get to the late game, then there aren't many things bigger than Devastator.
No.
And that's what that's there for, if I'm playing a kind of blue control-y deck or something like that. Relentless, I'm a huge fan of. I love its ability because against some opponents, it absolutely causes problems. The ability to make their first event in a turn not do anything is really awkward, because by the time you're bringing this out, they probably haven't got a big hand. So they're probably not holding many events.
Yeah.
And they might be good ones. And if you force someone to not be able to use their super laser blast,
or even their one vanquish to get rid of it, yeah,
it can be a real pain in the backside to get rid of. Reinforcement Walker is a card that is worth talking about. It's extremely strong, and basically the main reason it's only in there is because I haven't decided who I like more, Reinforcement Walker or Palps. Now, Palps' ability to do 6 damage is brilliant in that aggro matchup where you're fighting lots of quite low level cards, you need to clear them off. Reinforcement Walker is also brilliant. Now, Reinforcement Walker's ability is super, super useful because when played on attack, so you've immediate impact, as soon as you put it down, it does a thing. Look at the top card of your deck. Either draw that card into your hand or heal 3 damage to your base. Now, every turn it attacks, you get to do the same thing. So this can be a lot of healing, and it's still on a platform that's a 6/9.
Yeah,
or a lot of card advantage.
It's a lot of card, and you can either, if you don't need the healing, you can be getting the cards, and if you do need the healing, well, you're getting quite a lot of healing. It's an absolutely brilliant card, and it has left me a little bit top heavy. It's probably worth talking about also a couple of the other cards that I've left in the sideboard, because they're not all that good, except in very specific cases. One of the ones that's in the sideboard there, I'm just grabbing my sideboard so I can read them off there, is the Corellian Freighter. Now, it's a 5-drop. It's a 4/4, not great, but it's Sentinel in space. And if you're playing a deck that's reliant very heavily on space damage and chipping away at you and things, then this can be quite a useful card, and it's nice to have to sideboard in.
Yep.
And the other card in there is Disabling Fang Fighter. And if you're playing someone who's reliant very heavily on upgrades, like John's bloody hero deck,
or somebody with Traitorous,
or somebody with Traitorous, because there's nothing that says that you've got to defeat an upgrade on your opponent's card.
No.
If they steal your card, you can break the Traitorous and have it back. You can also do the same thing with people who try and entrench your stuff.
Yep. Disabling Fang Fighter is a very common sideboard card to be able to get rid of upgrades, be they Traitorous, be they shields, be they entrenched, all this sort of stuff. Disabling Fang Fighter is worth its weight in gold.
And the last one there is Force Choke. Now, Force Choke, I've ummed and ahed with, and to be honest, I really didn't see the value in it when I first started playing this. If you control a Force unit, this event costs 1 less to play. Well, I haven't really got any Force units apart from Vader, so that goes out the window. So what we're talking about here is a 2-cost card that does 5 damage to a non-vehicle unit. That unit's controller draws a card. Now, it's got a nasty downside in you're giving your opponent an opportunity to draw cards, or you can play it on your own card, kill your own card off, and draw yourself another card. So if you do have something like a Super Laser Technician, you can kill off your own Super Laser and draw a card from it, which can be quite useful. But card advantage is not really an outrageously big thing in this game against a lot of decks. So yes, you're letting your opponent draw another card, but you're also able to 5 damage is not to be sniffed at. And the difference between it and something like a takedown is takedown will only work if it's got 5 damage left, whereas this will do 5 damage to something even if it's got 6, and you can finish it off with your Vader.
Question for you then, Tony.
Yes.
You put it in your sideboard.
Yep.
What would you swap out for it?
Generally, I'd swap it out for Pit.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Okay. Yeah.
I might swap it out if I'm playing against a kind of aggro deck where that's going to be really useful and I want to kill things off. Then I can take things like the Relentlesses out because they're never coming out to play.
True. Yeah.
Because the chance of me ramping all the way up to
one or two of the 8-drops.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start trimming off things like Pier, who really goes with those 8-drops, and the 8-9 drops at the end there, to try and give myself space so that I can play a much more mid-rangey game than the late game.
Okay.
To try and cope. Now, this is never going to do that well against... It's so weak to aggro, but I've built this to be as good as I can against that type of deck, you know? So I might be able to sneak that win, which means I squeeze through, whereas before I'd been just absolutely boned. So yeah, that is the deck that I am currently mostly playing with.
Okay, so if you wanted to make that deck, then I showed you again what you needed to remove from your starter deck to make that happen, and then I have got some bullet points on what I think your deck does. Your deck's also going to get to 7 resources quicker, with additional resupplies. You've added a few restore mechanics to allow you to potentially stay in the game a little longer and reach some of those higher cost cards. You've got good ways to clear out units with additional bombing runs or even traitorous. We touched on both of those. You've got slightly less synergy with Vader's regular actions, I guess, because you probably don't have as many villain cards, but you should be able to sustain, hopefully, with the extra restore until larger cards start to come out. You've got ECL in there, which I don't think we touched on, but that does allow you to get some key units like the Shore Trooper or the Ruthless Raider to hit as soon as they arrive, which is obviously very strong. And again, you don't have any legendary cards in this deck.
Yeah. We probably should talk about the ECL there, because
Sure.
ECL is
shorthand for Energy Conversion Lab.
Energy Conversion Lab.
Yep.
It's a 25 health base, so I'm sacrificing 5 health to run this. And it's
Which
got a
for a
single
deck that
once
wants
per
to
game.
go into ramp and into the long game, that's not a trivial sacrifice.
It's not. And so what I'm doing is I'm paying 5 health to allow me to once per game give a unit that is 6 or lower ambush. And there's really a couple of uses for this. The first one is it's the hit your opponent isn't necessarily expecting at this time. So something like we mentioned earlier, the 97th Legion, I know it's not in this deck, but if that was a sick, that'd be broken because of this card. Because it would mean that from nowhere, you're suddenly playing a fairly big hitting 6-drop card. So in this deck, it's the Ruthless Raider or that's really actually 6 drops. It's one of your bigger cards, something like that, straight out into ambush, straight attacking something. Now, I have to admit that the main use that I've used this for in almost every single game I've played it is it allows me to ambush with a super laser technician, which means you can come out, do 2 damage to an enemy unit, hopefully kill it if it's a lightweight unit, and immediately go into play as a resource. He's a villainy card, which means that he can not only do that, he will trigger Vader's ability. He's given you another resource, so on turn 3, he comes out, he attacks something, he dies, and then Vader can ping something else for 1 damage in a base.
Yeah.
And that's the main reason it's in there, is to let me put the because it doesn't give a chance for your opponent to traitor as one of your technician, because he's already dead.
Yep. Cool.
And that's quite powerful.
Cool.
Okay, I'm so glad that I got you guys on here to talk about how to improve these decks. I did want to just mention these are some cards I would like, but I do not have any Darth Vaders. If you were lucky enough to pull a Darth Vader, would he be good in these decks as a 7-drop? Of course he would, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. But at the moment, the current English cost is about £60 for a Darth Vader.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to pull one.
And that's likely to go up between now and sort of October sort of time when the reprint is due-ish.
Cool. So Force Surrender is a card I liked as well. Draw 2 cards. Each opponent whose base you've damaged this phase discards 2 cards. I feel like you're probably going to be damaging bases with this deck. You don't like it?
No.
Be honest.
Really.
Okay.
I mean, okay, sure. When you get to the late game, discarding cards from the hand can be useful. Drawing 2 cards can be useful, but I'd rather do something that kills an enemy unit, or better yet, play a unit that will do some damage to the base rather than just sort of like
six is a lot.
Things. Yeah.
6 is a lot. Okay. What about? I do have the 1/5 drop. Then you guys never touched on. I guess the Force Imperial Inquisitor. She is a saboteur, so attacks ignore Sentinel and defeat Defender shields. When this unit deals combat damage to an opponent's base, you may 3 damage to a ground unit the opponent's control. That doesn't seem super horrible for a 3/6 for 5.
She's really good. She's useful. She's a force unit, which allows you to start using things like force throw, force choke, even the force lightning a bit more if you want to pop those into your decks as well.
Absolutely. And it's got synergy with things like the Fallen Lightsaber and that, if that's a route that you want to go down. It's a perfectly good unit.
But neither of you like it.
I didn't say I didn't like it. I just didn't. I'm not building around that force synergy. So
okay.
She doesn't do a lot of damage to base when she's attacking for a 5-drop with only 3 attack.
Yep.
She's got a decent amount of defense. The fact that she can skip around Sentinels is quite handy.
Here's a question.
She's not got ambush. So I would have to use my ECL to get her out if I wanted to do something the turn she comes down.
But even then, she'd only be ambushing for 3 damage.
But even then, she'd only be ambushing for 3 damage.
And you wouldn't trigger the dealing combat damage to an opponent's base ability. So there's no
So-
real synergy with ECL.
Yeah, so really what you're saying is here's a 5-drop that I'm going to put down, and I'm going to let you do what you want to that 5-drop for a whole turn.
If I'm going to play a 5-drop in this deck, it's going to be Steadfast Battalion, which is a 5/5 Overwhelm unit, costs 5. It's a single green resource. And if you have a leader unit active, when it attacks, it gets to put +2/+2 on a unit for the rest of the phase, which can be itself. So it's a really popular thing for ECLing because you can ECL it out, ambush, the overwhelm damage over beyond what it kills. It's a great card.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring that out to kill your Boba in 1 hit is quite a famous move. It's not the best one in this deck just because it takes so long to get Vader out, and you really need your leader out to get the biggest bang for that buck.
But no, Seven Sisters, a solid unit.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that was pretty much it. Final thoughts. Who we are.
Okay, was that an accident?
It's both, I guess.
No, it was deliberate. It was absolutely intended. Yeah.
So, you can tell us how our modifications are right or our modifications are wrong in the comments. We genuinely,
if we are wrong on the internet, we would like to hear that.
Like I say, this isn't. I wasn't expecting John to put my deck into this episode, so I didn't modify it for like any use. I know it's got some problems with too many 8-drops in it. It's just what I've been playing. It started out with what I had, and now it's become what I like to play. And I keep coming back to this deck because it's fun. It's just a fun deck to play, and it works quite well.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think I tried to make a smaller condensed video, and then it grew arms and legs, and I had 19 slides if you include our ugly faces on there. So I figured it'd be better to get you guys in. We'll talk about it. If you did like this video, do some of the YouTube algorithm stuffs, like it, subscribe, leave us a comment.
And if you didn't like the video, do it anyway.
Tell us by writing comments.
I was going to say, if you didn't like the video, we're going to send Marks to your house, and he is going to hit you with...
Now it's the time for the overwhelming power.
Oh, now he's not going to do it.
You get to do it this time.
I don't know if I can do it.
No, you can't do it.
I'm trying to think how he does it. Is it like, no, unlimited power.
Unlimited power. Yeah.
Perhaps
well.
Cool.
That's very tragic, I should say.
That's a terrible ending to a video. We've got to cut it there.
All right, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.